Hello, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural Blabbit broadcast. Blabbit is something that Paul Geiger and myself are doing to share our common experiences, different backgrounds to help people with their endeavors, whether it be speech, whether it be talking to people, doing a presentation, finding different ways just to further each of us, whether it be personally, professionally, just to help you be better orators, better communicators, better doing whatever you're doing in your daily life that you're struggling with when it comes to communication. So, Paul, tell me a little bit about your background, if you wouldn't mind, real quick, just so we can let everyone know who they're talking to.
Sure. Hi, everybody, and thank you for being a part of this broadcast here today. My name is Paul Geiger, and I have been a speech coach in New York City for well over 11 years, and it was a really incredible experience. I began believing that most people who would come to gain my advice would be looking to fix their voices in some way. And it turns out that even though New York is an international city, there's a certain percentage of people who wanted to reduce accents. And there was a certain percentage of people who wanted their voices to be louder or softer or smoother or however they might characterize it. But the majority of people really wanted help with being clear. Not only sounding clear, but feeling confident about their clarity of getting a message across. And I find that goes across the board. It doesn't matter if you are a native speaker of American English or if you're a non-native speaker, the challenges are still there. Now, obviously, if American English is not your native language, that's a big challenge as well. It's an additional obstacle. So I worked out of a studio in New York City for many, many years, met some incredibly interesting people in many walks of life, primarily in finance, media, technology, and pharmaceuticals. And so many of the challenges were very common to all of those apparently or seemingly disparate business verticals. So I wrote a book in 2017 called Better Business Speech: Tricks, Techniques, and Shortcuts to Public Speaking at Work. And I refer to myself now not so much as a speech coach, but as a public speaking coach, as well as a leadership communications expert. So I often, since I've helped so many executives, so many C-suite individuals, really clarify their messages and also figure out the nuances between talking up, talking down, and talking to either side of you in business, that leadership communications has become a real priority. So all of that having been said, we're going to be handling some basic questions and also some detailed ones here. So we want to make sure that everyone understands some of the questions may seem like they're a little detailed, but it's kind of an overview. Because again, if your challenge, your whatever is giving you cause to pause, is probably something that someone else is going through as well. So we're all in good company.
Nice.
Glenn.
Well, just to give kind of a quick overview, my first probably 10 years after school, I was in operations management, running businesses for different companies. And then my wife made the comment to me when our daughters were small that I would make more money selling for businesses than running them. And I couldn't argue with her, so I convinced the owner of the company to give me a shot at sales. And failed miserably. I remember the first time I kind of shared with you, I was out in your neck of the woods. And the first day I was so scared I didn't leave the hotel. And the next day I realized, you know what, no one knows me here. I'm going to give it a shot. And it came from a person that, did a very good job of running businesses. I was okay talking around a group of people I knew, but to talk to people, to make presentations was a little bit unnerving at that point. And so from that point, for that, a larger company, a few years down the road, I ended up being in charge of sales and training and stuff like that for a very large public company. And it was kind of an interesting, I think, learning experience for me as much as anything, really understanding the different ways people learn things and how to disseminate information in multiple forms so that everyone can obtain it, digest it, and then turn it back out in whatever way works best for them. So between working for a large company, training on large scales, to working with a lot of small businesses, doing some consulting, helping them refine their businesses over the last 10, 15 years. It's just, I enjoy seeing people kind of, I guess the teacher part of me, seeing them understand something, obtain some knowledge, and then seeing success off of the tools that we've been able to help them make their business and lives a little bit better. So that's the main thing I've done from kind of personality evaluation standpoint, to teach people how to talk to different people, teaching them different ways to have a process with selling, and then finally creating kind of what I call a personal broadcast network, being able to increase your sphere of people and to communicate with them and find ways to help them with their businesses.
Nice.
So we just talk to people like this every day. It's just different manners, different forms.
That's right. And, I have to point something out, Glenn. I am a presentation coach as well, and I'm looking at both of our pictures here on the monitor side by side. And for anybody who joined late, Glenn and I are not in the same room, even though it looks like we might be looking out the same window, because they look very similar. But actually, we're on two separate coasts. Glenn, you're in Huntington Beach.
Yes, today I'm in Huntington Beach, California. We split time between Huntington Beach and Las Vegas.
All right, great. And I'm in Belmar, New Jersey. So we are literally on both coasts.
Yeah.
All right.
Nice. So let's share with people kind of, again, I think kind of like what I call the 50,000 foot overview, if you wouldn't mind, just some of the things that we want to try and help people maybe understand, comprehend, maybe get some better tools together for them to use in their everyday life.
Great.
So what would you share kind of your perception on some of those, Paul? Kind of some of the things that we talked about as far as introducing people or inviting them to the webinar. I know we talked about, delivering a great pitch, dealing with nerves in front of customers, transitioning into an online presentation. Do you want to take one or two or all of those and kind of discuss them a little bit?
Sure. What I was saying before, and what you were alluding to and speaking of, was the idea of learning something, integrating something that you've heard, that you've learned, that you've been advised on, into your communication style, into your ability to get a point across. And I know we're going to be touching on a bunch of those things, but I think what I want to start with first is probably one of the things that people don't really like to talk about, but yet we all experience it. And it is being a little uncomfortable about speaking in front of people. Now, that can be, some people refer to that as public speaking anxiety, a fear of public speaking, the nerves of getting up in front of people. And it used to be something that was primarily face-to-face, person-to-person, or speaking in front of a large group. But really the same rules apply, even though we have suddenly been thrust into this online world. Your logical mind looks at the little camera lens, wherever that might be on your laptop or separate camera that you have, and you realize, I think a lot of people are watching me. So you're getting a lot of the same responses that are happening. And what I tell everyone is, the one thing that is going to get you over that obstacle, and most people have experienced that feeling, and it usually goes away after a couple of seconds or a couple of minutes. So we're really talking about the beginning, that shaky start right in the beginning, has to do with doubting your ability to generate your own forward momentum. So that's the biggest thing. I mean, you could say, no, I'm worried about the sense of judgment. How are they going to see me? How are they going to judge me? I'm worried about the consequences of what happens. I'm worried about the legacy, the immortality of this being recorded and everybody looking at it years from now. So whatever it might be, embarrassment, shame, lack of confidence, all of those things are the emotions that I believe come from not having that forward momentum. In other words, not feeling in charge of moving things forward. And we as listeners recognize it when we see somebody who projects that they know where they're going and they're taking their listeners with them. And we just process that as being, well, yes, they're sure of themselves, but not in a boastful way, but they know what they're talking about. They're getting their point across. So therefore, it's clear what they're saying. I can consider whether I agree or whether I don't. And that's immaterial when you're the speaker, even though, as most of us know, that thought goes through your mind. Are they looking at me like they agree with me? Are they looking at me like they disagree with me? Do I have something in my teeth? I mean, it can be so many different things. So what I tell everyone is, don't discount the physical side of speech. And I know, Glenn, you and I were talking about this earlier. The idea of taking a deep breath and being the generator of your own forward momentum. Because if you look at the technical side of speech, and again, I don't want to go into a big deep dive of that. I really want this to be, as you said before, an overview of what's going on. But taking that deep breath, really, that's where your voice starts. There is no speech without you exhaling air. So what happens is, normally that process of having a good amount of vocal fuel, of really feeling like you're in charge of moving things forward, that gets diminished when you feel a little nervous. Because if you feel nervous, you're going to feel tight. If you feel tight, you're probably going to get tight in your core, which is where your breathing begins, with your diaphragm muscle. So my point being that a lot of the nerves can be circumvented on the physical side of speech, though it feels absolutely like it's totally in your head. Like this whole experience is in my head right now. And one of the things that really becomes more emphasized in this online world with cameras is a slightly, sometimes not slightly, but a slower response to the things that you're saying. So if you are keyed up to really pay attention to the positive response from people and the feeling of that energy, there's going to be more of a sense of disconnect. There's going to be a slower response, which, again, if you're looking for that as validation, you're going to feel that it's missing. And it will begin to diminish your forward momentum. It will pull you back at those times when you really wish that you were moving things forward.
Yeah, I think that's great. And personally, I love the fact that we're on video now, because it brings me back to my old days when I would be sitting across the desk from someone, speaking with them. And as you refer to things, as people will see here, as bumper stickers. I mean, the one thing I like about that when I can see you is, if I would call it the eyes glaze over. If their eyes they aren't paying attention, they aren't engaged, then I know I need to stop, back up,
Right.
come at a different angle to get them back engaged and interested in what I'm talking about. Because if they're not engaged, they're not listening, and what you're trying to present to them really is going on deaf ears.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I don't know about you, Glenn, but when I'm in a Zoom call with several participants and we're all looking at what is often referred to as the Brady Bunch squares on the screen, where everybody has a nice little picture, I'm not always 100% sure of what everybody's doing. It's if not twice as hard, 10 times as hard to take the temperature of everybody in the room. There used to be, if you were talking to a group, a sense of, all right, we have a sense of the energy in the room. And prior to being a speech coach, I actually put in many tens of thousands of hours of public speaking. So I do know what all of that really feels like. And it's definitely different when we're working online here. And I used to tell everybody, if you think you can take the temperature of everybody in the room, you are trying to do the impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're trying to take the temperature of everybody who's on a Zoom call, you are really attempting the impossible. So it's just, you're not going to get the same kind of response. So I go back to, you have to have that forward momentum. And where do you get it from when your mind is a little bit doubtful? You rely on your body. You really do. And I know a lot of times the advice that I give on the physical side of speech almost sounds like taking a golf lesson. Like, keep your arms straight, make sure you rotate your hips, make sure you, and it all sounds like really dumb stuff that we ought to be able to do. But in those moments, a lot of times the physical stuff flies out the window. And I always tell everyone, your muscle memory will be your lifeline in a lot of those situations. And you just have to make yourself feel physically as able to move forward. And that's a combination of all of the components of body language, your posture, and then your breathing and your gesturing. Again, we take all of these things into account. It's the energy. It's the energy that's coming across. And the perception is, all right, not that this person's a really good speaker, or wow, they're really commanding the Zoom call today. No, it's what you want to achieve is a sense of commitment to the words that you're saying. That's it. Because as you know, in the sales process, it begins with speaking in a committed way that gives the perception of authenticity that leads to the trust that obviously will allow for persuasion. Have you experienced that in your experience as well as in your teaching?
100%, 100%. And it's kind of interesting, and we still do the same thing with Zoom calls as we used to do in sales presentations and things back in the old days. And this was a little trick that Brian Tracy taught at an event I was at probably 20 years ago. Is he said, you know what? When you have a board meeting, you have an agenda. If you're having a sales meeting, if you're having a presentation, why do you not have an agenda? When you have an agenda and presentations, as you're speaking with somebody, whether it's a sales call, whatever, have the tendency to someone ask a question and you go off course and you go this way or that way. But you can answer that question and then reference back to, you know what, that's a great question. Can we hold that for a little while longer? And let's go back to the agenda. It was always a good way to kind of bring people back in. And to your point there with the Zoom call and stuff like that, I think it's a good tool, and there are other ones out there, to be able to, again, you can go off of having a conversation, you may lose some of the people, but then you come back to bring their attention to what you're doing here and go on to the next one. That way, at least periodically throughout your presentation, you're finding ways to, again, create engagement, create attention and stuff like that. It's not going to last for everyone there, but it's just another good trick, tool to kind of keep as many people on course as you can while you're doing it and speaking authoritative, like you said.
Right. And you really bring up a great point there, which is to have an agenda. And as you know, taking that a step further is making sure you share the overview of that agenda right in the beginning. It's part of making the contract with the person that you're speaking with. And along with making the contract, of course, is getting the positive affirmations, the levels of permission. In other words, getting those yes answers in a sales call is very important. And I think laying out the agenda and getting the person or the individuals that you're speaking to agree with you is of the utmost importance. Because if people know what is going to be happening, there's going to be an anticipation of what's going on, they will allow it to go on a little bit longer. If it feels like it's meandering, as you just said, you can easily pull it back. You've given yourself permission to go back to the agreed upon agenda. Now, if you have not set up an agenda, how can you possibly communicate that right in the beginning of a sales call? And I realize, having been in sales myself, that you don't want to reveal everything necessarily right in the beginning. But I believe that's a misnomer. I mean, we know it's not a mystery. We didn't come to a sales call thinking that it was going to be a barbecue. We have an idea. Both participants have an idea. And if the salesperson has done their job, they will truly understand what the benefits are by understanding what some of those pain points are. What are some of the solutions that I need? Because if you're going to try to sell me something that I don't need, I don't have that much time. So we're really talking about here about due diligence and preparation prior to. Now, from the communication lens, I mean, we're talking about sales, and this is really the great intersection of what both of our experiences are, is you're looking at it through the sales lens and putting together all of that agenda. I'm going to tell everybody that it makes you really come across as being the person who knows where they're going. And it just takes giving yourself permission to approach all of your sales interactions in this way. And yes, the details change, the individuals, the personalities, all of that changes, but it should not change the way that you approach, in a very generic way, going through a sales call, which, as we all know, being consistent is the road to success.
Well, and inevitably, a lot of times with sales calls, with salespeople, customers are wanting to jump ahead to know what's it cost. And that's what I've had. I still struggle today with people that we're coaching right now to get them to understand that you have one mouth and two ears for a reason. You should be asking questions and listening twice as much as you speak.
Yep.
Don't just constantly, spell out this is everything you're doing, because until you find out, like you mentioned earlier, until you find out exactly what their wants, needs, and goals are, how can you honestly provide a solution? And
That's
so
right.
to get people that are selling to say, just relax, because the one thing I like about it from I'm gonna say a personality and a little bit of a psychology aspect is if you're sitting there talking to me, you see me kind of sitting back in the chair just listening because you're coming at me. When you ask me a
Mm-hmm.
question and I start talking about me or my business, then I set up because I'm proud of what I'm doing here. I'm engaged in what I'm doing instead of what you're selling to me, and I come back and I'm engaged again.
Right.
So there are just a lot of little different ways to make the conversation, the presentation work better one on one, one on a few. And yeah, it's much easier one on one than one on 20 or one on 100, but similar techniques apply.
They do, and you bring up a really good point about asking questions. But first, the idea that you don't know if this would be a good solution often runs counter to the way we think, because time is money. My schedule, the person that I'm speaking to, they have a schedule. They have their own calendar that we're following. So nobody wants to waste their time. But I think it puts you on a much more of a level, more of a business, even business level. If you literally, and you can say these words, but definitely think them, this may not be right for you.
Mhm.
It may, this is a discovery. We're going to discover, it's not about me showing you all the great functions that this is and how wonderful and how better it is than my competitors. You're supposed to be a solutions person. You're supposed to be an advisor. You're supposed to be the person who is there with solutions to future problems, because it's not just a matter of this product. It's not just a matter of you've got to get the sale. And I think by not adopting that mindset, you're actually freeing yourself up. And I go right back to what we started with, which, what makes you nervous? Well, when you're in a situation where the stakes are high, where the potential payoff as a salesperson is big, it's the whole reason that you're there. It's easy. It's easy emotionally to go to that place. So you've got to give yourself ways and means of getting it done and overcoming that initial feeling.
Yeah, and I think it's just, again, we'll go through a lot of these little things as we go on down the road or whatnot. But again, you're having a one-on-one presentation. This kind of brings me back to I'm sitting here talking to Paul and I'm talking something, and I would bring up, you like the Beach Boys revival? What do you think about Brian Wilson? It's something that I can notice you're into because I see a poster over your shoulder. And again, now
Mm-hmm.
we're relating personally, not on a business side. It kind of um, people kind of become a little bit more comfortable speaking about other things because if it's just all business and it's nothing personal, well, anyone can do that. But if
Yeah.
the more you can get to know each other a little bit better, um, it's one technique that we've used for one of our businesses for the last about 5 years now, and it's been interesting from that aspect of it. What it does to our closing rate is we start with one little niche, and we say, okay, at the beginning of our call, we're going to take the first 15 minutes. I'm going to tell you about me, what motivates me personally, professionally, everything like that. And then I would ask you to do the same. And at the end of that time, if we agree that we are like-minded individuals and we want to work together, let's talk about business. If not, no harm, not foul, no foul. We wasted 15 minutes of our time. Let's go on with our lives.
Yeah.
It's amazing as you get to know each other a little bit personal level. We are interested in the same types of charities, things like that. Okay, then we are more alike, and people buy from people they know, they like, they have things in common with.
That's right. That's right. And you bring up a really good point. And for everybody who is watching this live or watching it as a recording, we're going to ping pong around quite a bit. So I'm going to use what you just said, Glenn, to springboard into online presentations. And you brought up a good point, which is you're talking to me, you are engaged with me, we are discussing everything, but yet you're also seeing what's in my background. And we've talked about this, that maybe this was something you really didn't need to consider last year or even up to February of this year. But because of the circumstances that we all find ourselves in, there has been an absolute paradigm shift in the way that we are doing business and will be doing business in the future. Now, I'm not saying that I predict that we're never going to go back to being an office space or meeting with individuals one-on-one. But until circumstances will even begin to allow that, we're going to be doing a lot of things online. So obviously the way you come across online is really important. And we're all friendly people. We're all knowledgeable experts when we're speaking with coworkers, colleagues, potential business associates, partners, whatever. It's nice to have your background speak a little bit to who you are and also be a little bit interesting. So you want to, and again, this is a little bit of professional advice, you do want to compose what that looks like. And I'm not saying that you're going to get really expensive things and put them around and make it look like you're really successful, or do your Zoom calls from your garage where your Ferrari is sitting. You want to make it look like a lived-in space. And that's one of the benefits to what is going on right now. Because if you're not in your office space that has been beautifully manicured and painted and you've had a decorator come in, you are Zooming from home, from a home office, which if you're lucky enough to have a home office, that's great. For most of us, myself included, it's an extra bedroom and you're just shooting into the best possible space. Now, you brought up the Beach Boys poster. That was actually a musical event that I was involved with several years ago, and it was all Beach Boys music. Yeah, my hobby is a musician as well. So it's something I'm very proud of, actually something that's been on that wall for about 4 years. So I just figured, leave that up there. And if you look at my background, I've also got a voiceover mic here, which sort of says, all right, I guess he has something to do with voice. So that kind of validates in my mind, if I'm watching, that he is who he says he is. And, we put various things in our backgrounds. I look at yours and I see you have a saying in the back there about doing good and being kind. And, we talk about having plants makes it look lived in. And, I realize a lot of it is working with what you've got. But you want to look for the best possible space to shoot into. And I always say positioning is so important. Again, I look at your background, Glenn, and I see you've got a bookcase, which is actually one of my top 3 things that I advise people to have in your background. Why? Because you can put a lot of interesting things back there, as you know. The other one is shoot into a corner. So I don't know if you can tell, but I'm in a corner here, just because it gives good movement like this. And all of these observations are backed up by what we see on television, because even those professionals, those celebrities, are having to go through the same thing. They're doing professional broadcasts from an extra room in their house, but they're maximizing that space. Now, shooting in a corner is number one. Number two, very close behind, is have a bookcase in the background. Number three, if you're lucky enough and can afford it, have a fireplace. That's a really nice one, especially when the weather gets a little bit cooler. Of course, not there in Florida, not there in California, but here on the East Coast. So I say, if you can do all three, and some people do, then you've maxed out your background quota, and you're doing pretty darn well. So yeah, that whole presentation side of things, that's a big deal too. But the great news, as you know, Glenn, is once you set it up, now you're being consistent every time. We go back to that, be consistent with the things that you do. Follow through. If it requires a little bit of piecing things together prior to opening up your camera and getting the call started, so be it. What does it take? 5 minutes? Move things around, clean things off the floor, tidy it up a little bit. I don't know. It's not going to change anytime soon. So I tell everyone, get used to it. Might as well maximize what you've got.
Exactly. Now, the one thing I do like from people that we're helping sell a product, sell a service with this online migration we've done is basically you can put together a whole big slide series about different things about your services and your products.
Right.
And then if Paul contacts me and says, hey, Glenn, can we jump on the call? I want to talk to you about your services or whatnot. Sure. Can you give me 15 minutes? And now I have all these slides. I can do a little bit of research about Paul's business, put a couple of slides together, move some out. And because you have everything assembled, you're just detracting, not creating a complete presentation. And you could have a complete presentation ready to go in 5 or 10 minutes because everything's online in front of your computer. I can't be to your office in 10 or 15 minutes. I can't be there and ready to do a complete presentation, but there are some advantages if you take the time to prepare, like you said, from a presentation standpoint, to doing this stuff offline now.
No, and it's so true. We are comparing the what used to be the in-person, and again, we will probably to a certain degree go back to that, but so much of it is online. But as you know, working with slides, that's really not an opportunity to just turn on the slides and that's the end of the call, because as you just mentioned a few minutes ago, you've got to make that connection. You've got to reaffirm that. So I always tell everyone, you want to lead your slides. You don't want your slides to lead you. So one of the habits that I try to break so many of my clients from over the years is simply putting on the slide, okay, what we have here next is, and I say what a really good practice is when working with slides, and definitely this applies to working online, is have a leading statement that suddenly your slide will either answer the question or clarify the statement in the same way you would if you had a clicker in your hand and a big screen behind you. Same sort of thing. You are the storyteller. The story, I realize we're in a visual world and we say, oh, well, yes, that can tell so much of a story. But you want the role of solution giver, the role of advisor you want that to be placed upon you. Not the product, not the quality of the slides, not the aha moment that the information may give them. You want that to be delivered by you. So none of this goes away because we're working online. There's nowhere to hide, nor should you want to hide in any way. I understand the emotion, the physical response that people have is, I'm not really that comfortable with this. What can I do to make it more comfortable? Well, if I put on the slides, then I can breathe for a little while and get it together. That may be true, but you're still talking anyway. And you do want to keep inserting yourself back in. So you don't want to make it talk for 10 minutes, 30 minutes of slides. because you'll lose people. We like that human connection.
Definitely. Paul, we do have a few questions. So let's
Great.
start with this one that says, how do I deal with nerves when I have a presentation in front of a group, maybe without a lot of experience?
Okay. What I tell everyone is usually there, the nerves will hit you in two phases. For many people, nerves are a buildup. They're a buildup to that moment, the anticipation, because really, if you look at the definition of fear in the dictionary, it's anticipation of what's going to happen. So I go back to what I said just a few minutes earlier about the physical side of speech, and what falls in that physical side of speech is breathing. So I tell everyone to in those moments where your mind might be swirling, you're anticipating, there's a lot that's going on in your head, don't let go of your breathing in the beginning so that you begin to diminish that buildup of anticipated nervousness. The second phase is when you get right in front of those people, when you know, when the silence, what I call the vacuum of silence, hits, and we feel this online as well. The vacuum of silence hits, and you're the only person who's in charge of moving things forward. That's a different phase of nerves. And that's the one that really is the sudden jolt of nerves that will cause that fight or flight response. And you can do neither one. So that's where the frustration, that's where the physical response comes. Since your adrenaline is picking up, you can't leave, you can't stand and fight, but the best choice is to stand your ground and move forward. And again, I rely on breathing to do that. And going back to what you said about agenda in the beginning, and I know you brought up the term bumper stickers, and that might have been something that people were wondering about, but if they've ever seen any of my videos on social media or read any of my articles or anything, I love bumper stickers. And it just refers to a personal characterization of what this is all about. And if you have that good bumper sticker in the beginning and you take a deep breath and you state it with commitment, you have not only established yourself in the eyes and ears of your listeners, but you've given yourself a big physical bonus because you've grounded yourself in your body, which begins the process of allowing those nerves to diminish right away, rather than build up to the point where you have a really shaky start and you spend the next 5-10 minutes digging yourself out of a hole.
Nice, nice. We have another one that says, how do I get past the stigma of being a salesperson? I'll address that first if you don't
Yeah,
mind.
yeah, you go ahead.
I think the biggest thing that I've been able to convey and share with people is I see a lot of people that have a good product, have a good service. Maybe they worked in customer service or some other form or fashion, and they decide they want to try and get into sales. And I know it may seem oversimplistic, but I think all sales is telling somebody what type of service you're going to provide for them. So if you know you're good at what you do, what services or products you offer, and you think you can stand behind them, all you're going to tell somebody is what they're going to do once they hire you, and then you're providing that service or that product to them. So I think if you can kind of keep it in that kind of realm, maybe just and slow down, don't get too upset, and just tell them about your products, about your services, things that you have confidence in, you believe in, and what you're going to do about those. And then you can always use that just magic sales close that I've used for years. Would you like to get started? It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be salesy. It doesn't have to be high pressure. And the biggest thing I would say to anyone as they're listening to you or I down the road more is to take part of what Paul says, part of what I say, and mold it or meld it into your personality, your background, and have it comfortable for you coming out. Because if you're trying to reiterate something that I say or something that Paul says, it probably isn't going to be natural. And if it doesn't sound natural coming from you, people can read through that and know that. So just finding ways to take your products, take your services, tell a customer why they should purchase your product or service versus the other ones, what you're going to do to help them with their company down the road as an existing client. That's all sales is just telling them about the service up front.
Right, right. And for everyone again listening now, we're talking about best practices, but don't think for a minute that either Glenn or I don't experience a little bit of that anxiety in the beginning. Don't think that we've somehow figured out a magic potion for getting around it, because these are physical responses. These are emotional human responses. You were just alluding to the rejection that you feel, and understanding what's the purpose. Why am I spending the time to compose my background, get together, schedule somebody on the calendar, put together my slides? Well, I want them to say yes. And when they don't, that doesn't feel good. So we all do experience these things. These are just, we're giving tips on things that we have seen work, that we know work, and also things that we know work for others. So the whole purpose here of Blabbit is to share some of those little nuggets, those gems, those secrets that we have figured out over time. And we go through the whole learning process ourselves. I know I'm famous for telling my various clients, if I learn something new in the morning, I'll be teaching it to somebody in the afternoon. So it really is this whole process. And I know we've covered a lot of things here today, but, and for everyone, a couple of them will resonate, and you'll take a couple of them with you. Learning is a matter of being consistent. So I'm really hoping that these talks can become a consistent part of everyone's weekly learning process. And as we share, we learn. So we really do appreciate your comments, your questions. If you feel like a question has been repeated several times every week, it doesn't matter, because somebody has that question and somebody needs to learn. So this is a platform for sharing all of that.
And I think a point to what you just were saying there is, yes, I've been selling, it seems like, since birth, but it's only been about 25 years. And do I still get some anxiety or some butterflies in your stomach? Yes. But the difference is those of us that do it and do it well become kind of like adrenaline junkies. I enjoy being uncomfortable. And I know people may think that's crazy, but it's no difference than people that jump out of planes all the time. They're still a little bit uneasy when you maybe jump out of a plane, but the more you do it, the more you enjoy it, and the more fun it becomes.
That's right. That's right. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be
Exactly.
afraid to interact, but don't make the same mistakes that might be holding you back.
And don't be afraid of failure. I mean, again, whether we're talking about presentations, especially with sales, if you play Major League Baseball and you only get a hit 3 out of 10 times, you end up in the Hall of Fame.
That's true.
It's the same with sales. You just have to know how many times do you have to hear no before you hear a yes. I remember back in the old days, I was with a guy. I was doing some presentations and some training. It was in South Dakota. And so we were out doing old-fashioned cold calling door to door. And he had then in his mind that out of every 10 people he would talk to, 8 would say no, but 2 would say yes to an appointment. And we walked into an office building, and I think he'd had like 6 or 7 no's in a row. And so he literally went to the receptionist and said, "Would you just say no to me?" And she said, "Excuse me?" He said, "Would you just say no?" She said, "Sir, I really don't understand what you're saying." He said, "Well, I know I do this, this, and this, and I've just had 7 people tell me no. And I know if you tell me no, the next 2 people are going to want to talk to me and learn how I can help them." And she said, the first thing she goes, "Well, I'd like to know how you could help us." So again, finding some ways to make fun of it, knowing numbers and stuff like that, you never know what could happen.
I know. And as you're telling that story, on the surface, it sounds like a trick, but it's not. It's a mindset shift. It's your personal mindset shift that allows that to occur. And it's really just another great example of speaking authentically, because if you believe it, then it's going to come out like you're committed to making that statement, and it's, again, on the surface, it seems like a trick, but it's not. In its core, it's based on the things that we've been talking about here today and will continue to be talking about.
Nice. Well, we are right about 45 minutes. I always want to make sure we can keep these under an hour because everyone has to get on with their Fridays. They have other things to do. Let me see real quick to see if we have any other questions. Give me just a moment here. You know what? We do have one more question that I think is kind of interesting, and I think maybe we can both address this a little bit.
Sure.
It doesn't matter if you're doing a presentation, if you're speaking up in front of people, if you're having a Zoom call, whatever. How do I deal with a type A personality that's on the other camera or the other end of the conversation?
Okay. A type A personality, I guess what you're saying is someone, type A referring to the first letter of the word aggressive?
Aggressive, dominant, yeah, something like that.
Well, I would say that you're not going to be able to, obviously, you're going to want to make sure, bringing up a point that you spoke of before, which is the aspect of listening. You do want to placate that personality, or at least make sure that they understand that you are listening. So I like using phrases like, if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying is, and then reiterating it back, because that usually, knowing that they're being heard is definitely an important step. Regardless, now I know, you do want to set up an agenda, and if you immediately recognize, as you always will, that you're dealing with a type A personality, then you do have to give them a moment to say what it is they need to say. And again, using phrasing like, I understand your point of view, if I'm hearing you correctly, that sounds fair. In other words, bringing that into the conversation as well. So again, and I find it really interesting that we're able to share these questions, Glenn, because for me, the prism that I see everything through is language. And that's not exclusive to the way you see it either, but I'm intrigued to hear what your point is on that.
Well, it kind of goes back to a book I read when I first started doing this, talking about how to deal with each study either has 4 to 6 primary personality traits.
Right.
And the one thing that it kind of said, and it's rang true with me many times over the last 25 years, is when that person has that personality, and I've seen some people that try and cloak it and try and act like they're the normal person, but truly down, they are that type, I always try and do a little bit of research prior to meeting them so I can know if they went to USC, Columbia, Harvard, something like that I can talk about, seeing what their interests are in, and then realizing that, again, anytime I can let them talk a little bit about themselves, they like to do that, especially as a boisterous type of personality. And then it's understanding that they want to respect you, but if you try and be an equal, that shuts them down a little bit. So you have to be respectful, but still hold them just slightly above you, because otherwise they shut down when they think you're equal or above them. Right. So it's just using those words, like you said, finding ways to keep them excited, making them still feel dominant and powerful, but showing that you are worthy of their time and worthy of their respect and worthy of their trust.
That's a great tip, and it goes back to what you were talking about before about doing your due diligence. If you do your due diligence prior to the call, you will have so much more success in that regard. Not just knowing about the company, but knowing about the individual, because ultimately you really want them to get to know you, and you want to get to know them. And it is the fastest way to allow them to open up and have the conversation, but yet you still are allowed to insert your agenda in there.
Yeah.
Good.
Awesome. Well, I think we've had a great week here, Paul. I'm looking forward to many to come. And again, our listeners, if you have any questions, any subjects you'd like or questions you'd like us to go over, I think we are going to try and build upon these each week, maybe delve into certain sections. We're going to have some guests on here that maybe you may be interested and excited to hear give their opinions as well. But we just want to try and, again, help people become more comfortable in their own skin, be comfortable speaking in whatever manner you are. And a lot of these things we're talking about professionally. But as a gentleman with 22-year-old daughters, I've used a lot of these with my girls over the years too, of having conversation with them and understanding their personalities and knowing how to deal with them. So it's something that not only do we use in our personal life every day, professional, we will use them in our personal lives too. Communication is communication. Doesn't matter whom we're speaking with.
Sounds good, Glenn. Thanks so much. This has been a very productive and interesting and enjoyable session. Look forward to more.
All right. Well, if you want to be a fly on the wall, we'll see you again next Friday. Have a great week.